Brad. I'm from Exercise Institute. What we try and do is bring evidence-based practice to training and preparation, particularly for endurance athletes. What that means is scientific concepts to apply to your own training and preparation. So, what questions or concerns or comments do you have around training that you might like answering in this short window? Anything jumping out at you?
Pretty go with.
Sorry? Bit of partner up.
Getting personal. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a factor.
Heavy aches maybe. Like I just feeling over the last week, my legs have just been. Today I had an average output of 160 watts compared to usually around 200.
Yeah.
So it was a bit weird.
Bit cool.
Yeah.
This is all new to me when we've been building, and we did 150 odd Ks the weekend before last. And even this weekend, I was just done.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much time you need after the big training rides to actually feel like you got a bit of spark about it.
Yeah.
There's a couple ways of measuring that. You can measure it objectively through power, heart rate, and things like that.
But I don't have any of this smart. What's meter is your like? I don't know how you measure that.
Power pedal.
Yeah, so that's one way of measuring it. But then there's actually another,
Average speed. And
another really good tool is actually perception. How hard it feels to do something. And if it's harder, then that's a high probability that you can so some of like what we'll go through is how you manage that as well. So if we go back and have a look at the initial slide, it's really easy to come across popular press articles around the latest supplement or the latest technique to increase performance or whatever it might be, aerodynamic wheels or lightweight frame or whatever it is. Generally speaking, when you're looking at like endurance training needs, there's three big factors that have received a lot of scientific attention and have really big effect sizes, so they kind of work. One of them is volume. So, for instance, the world's best female cyclist last year averaged 25 hours a week across the years training. That's including like a 2 or 4 week off season and probably having a recovery week 1 in every 4 weeks. So she's probably doing like 30 plus hours a week on a work week of training, if not more. So, but who's got time for that? I ain't got time for that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
can some people just be like a power athlete and endurance is just not their gig?
yeah, but most of the time it's made, it's not bought or owned in many cases. So what's really important with frequency and volume is it's really well established. We've got to do it, but we can't. We've got work, we've got family, we've got whatever it might be, interrupting. So what does it look like for you? Like a maximum sustainable number of hours a week could be 6 hours a week. You take it to 7, after a couple of weeks, other things start to suffer. So it's about sustainability. What is it? What does it look like? Okay, 4 hours a week, 6 hours a week, 8 hours a week, whatever it is, commit to it and do it because volume works. Volume works. Sorry, really binary. The other one is high intensity training. Is that just going out and riding your bike hard? No, it's not. Way more nuanced than that. Okay? The third one is training intensity distribution. How much high intensity training do you do in relation to low intensity training? And as a percentage, what do you think that might look like? Yeah. So 80% low intensity, 20% high intensity is a bit of a rule of thumb. Okay? Olympic athletes in an Olympic year may take that to 35, 65. Okay? So we're talking about a smaller percentage is done at a really specific high intensity training stimulus. Okay? So the best way to measure that is to ascertain what your power is at VO2 max. Does anyone here not know of the concept of VO2 max? Okay, so if we were to do a test, you can measure it wearing having a gas analyzer, so measuring oxygen and CO2 through the mask. What this cyclist is doing is actually training at increasing intensities over time. So it could look like 25 watt increase in power every 2 minutes. Okay? Until exhaustion, they can no longer keep going. That's going to tell us where their VO2 max is, and it's usually towards the end of the test. So it's a long test, it might go for say 12 minutes of increasing intensity, and eventually you get to a point where you can no longer keep consuming oxygen, and then you pop. Okay? Important to know that point because oxygen turnover per minute, each of you, is what drives adaptation in high intensity. Okay? So some of your training needs to be done at really high oxygen turnover. Not a lot of it, some of it. And what better way to do it than at your actual ceiling? Where do we find where that ceiling is? Well, we need to measure you through this step test. Don't necessarily need to measure oxygen consumption because you can use power output as a proxy for that. It's much more cost effective. We have a facility in Subiaco, just down the road, where we do this. We measure this cyclists in situ. Okay, take them through a graded exercise test and understand where power at VO2 max occurs for each of them, for all of them. Okay, that tells us the exact intensity where high intensity training exists for each of you, and it'll be unique to each and every one of you, and it'll change over time as you adapt to your training environment or detrain to a lack of training environment. Okay, so it's dynamic. All right, really important though, the test that we would apply is called an MAP test. It measures how hard you have to go to hit this intensity. Tmax tells us at that intensity how long you can hold it for. Then with that data we can create a training interval set specific to you. So it might be 2 minutes for yourself, it might be 4 minutes for yourself, it might be 3.5 minutes for yourself. We don't know until we test. And that tells us 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 3.5 minutes on, 3.5 minutes off, 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, so on and so forth. Unique to each individual. And that's going to get us the most amount of time at your VO2 max. So with high intensity interval training, you can actually package it to the individual. You generally need to measure power to do that. You can't use heart rate because there's a lag in heart rate. If you're fatigued, your lag will be greater because there's greater autonomic fatigue, so the central nervous system is under more duress. It takes longer for the heart rate to get up. So heart rate isn't actually a great tool for measuring output. It's more measuring internal processes. Okay? So if you haven't got a power meter, and who here doesn't have a power meter on the bike? Yeah. Get out. Don't say no. With measuring that, basically what a power meter does is it measures the exact point where VO2 max occurs. The exact point. Okay? So we know it's like 283 watts. We know it's 174 watts. We know it's 93 watts, whatever it is. We know it occurs at that point, and then you can go and do intervals and actually look at the power output and be really specific around the training application. Most of you don't have a power meter. Ain't gonna work. Why am I even talking about it anymore?
It's all Latin.
It's all Latin, yeah. So if you haven't got a power meter and VO2 max is a foreign concept to you, how do you apply this stuff? So we want to, quality training will look like training at low intensities for 80% of the time. What low intensity looks like, the usual ceiling for low intensity will never be much more than about 75% of maximum heart rate. So when you went out and did that ride the other day on the weekend, you pulled up sore for the rest of the week, I'd love to look at how much.
It's sore.
It's just
Yeah, I felt
So
fine, but
if we look at your power, heart rate profile for that ride, I reckon we could be seeing like 50% of time spent above that mark, which is a huge stimulus, stress stimulus for the body to deal with. And if you're only training, say, how many hours a week do you reckon you might average? 8 hours a week, then it's going to take you quite a while to recover from that. Okay? So because your metabolism is not as high as what it would be if you were doing, say, 15 hours a week. Therefore, recovery is good. Okay? So for you, training at low intensities, 80% of the time lower than 75% maximum heart rate, challenge you to go out and do it this week. It's actually mind-numbingly difficult to do so.
I'm getting better. The older I get, I'm actually
Yep.
getting okay, enjoying the ride and not smashing myself every time I go out.
So what do you say, it's 75% of the maximum heart rate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Not
And
hard.
it's actually been weird. I've actually enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Sort of slowing
So
down.
most elite athletes that we work with, when we apply the stimulus, can't they go hard all the time.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is they might train, say, 80% a lot of the time, and you can actually sit there for a long time. No worries. But the problem is you incur a huge stress load. And then, when I ask them to go hard and do a really hard effort, repeatedly they can't, because they're under too much load. So you're training down here to preserve yourself, so that when you do have your hard sessions, you can snap them out. What it looks like for training intensity, basically the premise is 20% of your training time should be done at your VO2 max power or within 20% of that VO2 max power. What the hell does that mean? You don't know what VO2 max is or you don't have a power meter. I don't know.
Yeah.
What we can do is we can say to the bulk of people in this room, training it between 2 and 3 minutes on, 2 or 3 minutes off, at an intensity of about 9 out of 10. So 10 being absolute maximal, 9 being a sustainable maximal, like it's the wheels are going to come off, but you kind of got it under control. Okay, so 9 out of 10 intensity for 2 to 3 minutes at a time, 2 to 3 minutes off, 2 and 3 minutes on, 1-to-1 work recovery ratio. That's your baby there. That's high intensity training for the bulk of people in this room. And I guarantee if everyone in here is doing it, they'll be spending time with VO2. So say you do 3 minute efforts up the climb, 3 minutes recover back down the climb, go again, do it 5 times, more than likely you're getting 15 minutes at VO2 max across a 30-minute window. So if you're doing 5 hours a week, you want 1 hour a week of interval training. That's 2 30-minute sessions where you might do 5 3-minute efforts. That's a 30-minute session. Make sense? But you bring that level of specificity into your training diet, coupling it with low intensity training for the bulk of your exercise, you're going to be fresh enough and recovered enough to be able to hit out a session like that. Doing repeated 3-minute efforts accumulates time at that ceiling, VO2 max, maximum oxygen turnover, signals to the body, yeah, we need to do that. Powerful stimulus for driving adaptation. When you begin to train like that, your performance will improve from 3 minutes to 5 hours. Okay? So, in order to go up a 20-minute climb really fast, you don't go out and do 20-minute climbs. It doesn't work. I'd argue you wouldn't even go out and do 10-minute climbs. It needs to be shorter and harder. Highly trained athletes can hold VO2 max for longer, so their intervals might be 8 minutes long. Okay? But for the bulk of people in this room, if you're looking at sub 10-hour training weeks, short, hard intervals works really well. If you want to progress it over time, you might add an additional interval set each week. 5 3-minute efforts, 6 3-minute efforts, 7 3-minute efforts, so on and so forth.
If you've got your VO2 max power and you're feeling pretty fatigued to keep that power up, so if you're doing below 80% of that, your heart
Waste of
rate-
time.
Waste of time.
Don't do it. Go get fresh, come back and hit it another day.
Yeah.
If you're pretty fit, like it might only be 2 or 3 days, 4 days of just low intensity, come back, hit it again.
Is this not just riding specific, or is this for any sort of athlete? This concept?
This concept's very similar across all endurance exercise. The physiologist who wrote the papers on this, Sela, is now doing cross-country skis from marathon background and cycling background. He's taken Norway to the top of the gold medal table, and their budget is obscenely low. And he's just doing it through evidence-based practice.
So these are more endurance events, for more endurance
Yeah,
athletes.
anything from 3 minutes to 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. When you start to look at things like ultra endurance, there's other factors that start to come in there as well. But the concepts that remain the same. Big one. Quality of high intensity interval training.
Yes.
distribution of both. And that's really well established academically. Periodization is in the order that you prioritize things. So if you say build volume and then build intensity into an event, or if you start off with intensity and then build volume into an event, there's not much of an effect either way. So he's been able to evidence through integrating a whole bunch of different research what's actually really important and what's not. For the bulk of people in this room, kind of optimising your training environment, making sure that the 8 hours that you do a week, you're getting 20% of the really high quality stimulus, the rest is low intensity, lower stress levels, still good in that endurance base. Great way to go. And you still got a month to do it because everyone in here has been training. If you even apply this stuff now, the bulk of you are going to actually through a sensible approach to it. So not going out and doing like 10 3-minute efforts in a session, but maybe starting off trying maybe 3 or 4, 5 if you feel like you feel okay, maybe 81 or something. The training programs that have been uploaded that are free to access online replicate this from day dot. So you can go and have a look at them, you can rip one off. The West Cycle link and have a look at it. Don't need to follow it, but it's all there. The outlines it for you and meet up. Any questions with that stuff?
Volume on the bike, what sort of, as you're loading up week by week, what's okay, what's too much?
I think in cycling you wouldn't want to do more than about a 15% increase per week, 20% increase per week. I generally think for like these one-day events, the best way to train for it is by doing a lot of volume on a single day.
Yeah.
Trying to go beyond what you've done previously. Teaching the body to withstand all the thermo stress. Yeah, exactly. And that area does actually toughen up over time. But you know yourself, if you go and do like a big training day, you get busted up and stuff. It's all about like not going more than about 15%.
Yeah.
Anything else?